There are some secrets that sit so deep in your chest, you forget they're even there until you're alone at night, and then they surface like bodies in a frozen lake. I'm 55 years old now, and I've carried mine for 23 years. I've told no one. Not my ex-wife before she left. Not my daughter who lives in Duluth and calls every Sunday. Not the rangers I worked with until my retirement. But I'm tired now. Tired of the wait. So I'm going to tell you what I found in that cave in the winter of 1992, and you can decide what it means. I was a park ranger in the Boundary Waters back then, stationed near Ely, Minnesota. If you've never been up there, it's a place where civilization just stops. Thousands of acres of forest, frozen lakes, and silence so complete it feels like pressure in your ears. I'd been working there for 8 years, and I loved it. The solitude suited me. My marriage was already showing cracks. Sarah wanted kids, wanted me to take a job in the city, wanted a life I couldn't give her. The woods were my escape, my truth. That February was brutal. Temperatures dropped to 30 below, and the snow came in waves that buried the trails. Most visitors stayed away. It was just me and a skeleton crew, doing welfare checks on the few ice fishermen stubborn enough to be out there. I remember the morning clearly. The sky was that pale gray that comes before more snow, and my breath crystallized the moment it left my mouth. I was checking the northwest quadrant, following animal tracks just to have something to do, when I heard it. At first, I thought it was wind. But wind doesn't have rhythm. This was chewing. Wet, deliberate, the sound of something eating with focused hunger. My training kicked in, bear maybe or wolves on a kill. I approached slowly, my hand on the bear spray at my belt. The sound was coming from a rock formation I'd passed 100 times, a small cliff face with a cave opening I'd always assumed was too shallow to be interesting. I was wrong. The cave went back further than I'd thought, and the temperature inside was somehow colder than outside, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones and stays there. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, and that's when I saw the blood. Fresh. Dark pools of it on the stone floor, drag marks, and scattered remains of what looked like a deer. Maybe. The pieces were so torn apart I couldn't be sure. And then I saw him. I say him now, but in that moment I had no words. He was crouched in the back of the cave, maybe 10 feet from me, and he was... God, how do I describe this? Tall, even hunched over. Skeletal thin, with skin that looked gray and stretched too tight over bones that jutted out at wrong angles. His face. I'll never forget his face. Sunken eyes that caught my flashlight and reflected back like an animal's. But there was something else there. Something aware. His mouth was smeared with blood, and I could see every rib through his skin. We stared at each other for what felt like an hour but was probably 10 seconds. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But I didn't. Because in those eyes, beneath the wildness and the hunger, I saw something I recognized. Fear. Desperation. Pain. He made a sound, low and rasping, like a growl but more human than it should have been. Then he pressed himself further back into the cave, making himself smaller, defensive. That's when I noticed his leg. Broken, twisted at an angle that made my stomach turn. The bone was visible through torn skin, infected, black around the edges. Jesus, I whispered. My voice seemed too loud in that space. He flinched at the sound, drew back even more. I don't know why I did what I did next. Maybe it was the ranger training. Never leave an injured creature to suffer. Maybe it was something deeper, some recognition I didn't understand yet. I held up my hands slowly, the flashlight pointing down now, making myself less threatening. It's okay, I said, though it clearly wasn't. I'm not going to hurt you. He watched me with those luminous eyes, and I watched him. The deer remains between us. The blood. The impossible situation. I was looking at something that shouldn't exist, something from Ojibwe stories my grandmother used to tell me when I was a kid. Stories about hunger and winter and things that happened when people got lost in the deep woods and stayed lost too long. Wendigo. The word came to me like a whisper from my childhood. But the stories never mentioned this. The injury, the vulnerability, the terrible human fear in those eyes. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes, just breathing, trying to process. Then I did something that would change my entire life. I took the pack of jerky from my coat pocket, the sandwich Sarah had made me that morning, and I placed them on the ground between us. Then I backed away slowly, never breaking eye contact. "I'll come back," I said. "Tomorrow. With supplies." I don't know if he understood, but as I turned to leave, I heard him move. Heard the desperate scramble toward the food. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I couldn't tell anyone about this. Couldn't report it. Because they would come with guns and fear, and whatever he was dying. Starving. Alone. I emerged from that cave into the gray Minnesota afternoon, and nothing was the same. Not the forest. Not my life. Not me. I had found something impossible, and instead of running from it, I had made a choice. A choice that would define the next 2 decades of my existence. The lies started immediately. I told my supervisor that the northwest quadrant was clear. Just normal winter activity. I filed my report, went home, and lay awake all night staring at the ceiling while Sarah slept beside me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him. That skeletal face. Those eyes. The broken leg that was clearly killing him slowly. I'd read enough about wilderness survival to know he wouldn't last another week, maybe less. Infection like that, in this cold with no treatment? He was already dying. And yet he'd looked at me with such clarity, such desperate intelligence. Not like an animal. Like a person trapped in something terrible. The next morning, I told Sarah I had a long patrol. I loaded my truck with things I had no rational explanation for. Antibiotics from our medicine cabinet, splints, clean bandages, protein bars, dried meat, water. I felt insane. I felt more clear-headed than I had in years. The cave looked the same in daylight, though daylight is a generous term for February in Minnesota. Gray light, more snow coming. I approached carefully, making noise so I wouldn't startle him. The food from yesterday was gone, the wrappers scattered. I called out before entering. "It's me, the ranger from yesterday. I brought supplies." Silence. Then that rasping breath, coming from deep in the cave. I entered slowly, flashlight up but pointed to the side so it wouldn't blind him. He was in the same spot, watching me with those reflective eyes. In better light I could see more details. He was massive, even emaciated and crouched. He had to be 7 feet tall. His hands were too long, fingers ending in cracked nails that looked like claws. But the broken leg was worse than I'd thought. Compound fracture, bone exposed, the flesh around it turning necrotic. "That leg is going to kill you," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I can help. But you have to let me get close." He made that sound again, that almost growl. But he didn't move away. I took that as permission. I spent the next hour in that cave, working on a creature that shouldn't exist. I cleaned the wound as best I could. He made sounds that haunted me, low moans of pain that were too human. I packed it with antibiotics, wrapped it, fashioned a splint from the supplies I'd brought. His skin was cold under my hands, cold like touching ice, but I could feel a pulse. Slow, but there. He watched me the entire time, never looking away. And I talked to him. Told him what I was doing, why, like I would with any injured animal. Except he wasn't an animal. The awareness in those eyes was undeniable. "What happened to you?" I asked as I worked. "How did you get like this?" He didn't answer. Couldn't answer, maybe. But something in his expression shifted. Pain, yes. But also something like shame? Regret. I was projecting, probably. But I don't think I was. That became our routine. Every day, sometimes twice a day, I would visit. Bring food, change bandages, check the leg. I called in sick days I'd never used. Made excuses to Sarah. Disappeared for hours into the frozen wilderness. She stopped asking after a while, and that should have told me something about our marriage, but I was too focused on the cave. On him. The leg began to heal. Slowly, but it healed. And as it did, he began to change. Filled out slightly. The desperation in his eyes eased. He started. I don't know how else to say this. He started trusting me, would lean into my hands when I checked the wound, made softer sounds when I arrived. Once, about 2 weeks in, he reached out and touched my hand. Those long, cold fingers against mine. Gentle, careful, like he was afraid of breaking me. I named him in my head, though I never said it aloud. Seemed wrong to name something so clearly more than an animal. But I thought of him as Thomas, after my grandfather. It felt right. March came, and with it, complications. 2 ice fishermen reported strange sounds near the northwest quadrant. Howling, they said. Not wolves. Something else. My supervisor wanted to check it out. I volunteered immediately, led them in circles for hours until they got frustrated and left. But I knew it couldn't last. Sooner or later, someone would find the cave. Find him. You need to go deeper, I told him one afternoon in late March. Further into the woods. Somewhere people don't go. He looked at me, and I swear he understood. That night, under cover of darkness, I helped him. The leg was healed enough for him to walk, though he limped badly. We moved through the forest together, me leading with a flashlight, him following silently. I found him a better cave, miles from any trail, deep in a ravine where no one would ever venture. I brought supplies, set up a cache of food, did everything I could think of. I'll keep coming, I promised. Every week. I won't abandon you. And I didn't. For 21 years I kept that promise. Through Sarah leaving me, through my daughter's childhood, through seasons and storms and close calls. I brought him food, medical supplies when he needed them, company. He never spoke, but we didn't need words. He would sit at the cave entrance sometimes, watching the sunset with me. Those long, strange hands would gesture, and I'd understand. A thank you. A question. A shared moment of peace. But secrets have weight, and time has teeth. The end came last winter, though I suppose it had been coming for years. I'm not young anymore, and neither was he, whatever old means for something like him. My visits became harder. The hike to his cave took longer, my knees aching on the return trip. I'd retired from the Rangers by then, was living alone in a small house near Ely, watching my daughter build a life I was no longer really part of. I think he knew before I did that it was time. That January morning, the coldest day of the year, I made my usual trip. The forest was silent, snow falling in thick curtains. When I reached the cave, he was waiting at the entrance, standing fully upright for the first time in years. In the weak winter light, I could see him clearly. Still gaunt, still strange, but there was something almost peaceful about him, like a decision had been made. He looked at me with those eyes that had haunted my dreams for 2 decades. Then he did something he'd never done before. He stepped forward and embraced me, those long arms wrapping around my shoulders, his cold cheek against mine. It lasted maybe 5 seconds. Then he pulled back, looked at me one more time, and turned toward the deeper woods. "Wait," I called out. "Where are you going?" He paused, didn't turn around, but he raised one hand in what I recognized as goodbye. Then he walked into the trees and disappeared into the snow. I stood there until I couldn't feel my feet, but he never came back. I returned to the cave every day for a week, then every week for a month. Then, finally, I accepted it. He was gone. Maybe he'd found others like him. Maybe he'd walked out into the deep wilderness to die on his own terms. Maybe he'd simply decided it was time to let go of the human who'd tied him to one place for too long. I'm sitting here now in my small house, looking at the forest through my window, and I'm asking myself why I'm telling this story. Why now, after all these years of silence? Maybe because I'm getting old, and secrets shouldn't die with you. Maybe because I need someone, anyone, to know that it happened. That he existed. That for 21 years I had a friendship with something impossible, and it was the most real thing in my life. People ask me sometimes why I never remarried after Sarah. Why I seem so distant, so lost in my own thoughts. How do you explain to someone that you gave the best parts of yourself to a creature in a cave? That you chose isolation and secrecy over normal human connection? That you don't regret it, even though it cost you nearly everything? I learned something in those years with him. About compassion, about the space between what we think we know and what actually exists in this world. The stories call them monsters, Wendigos, creatures of hunger and cold and madness. But he wasn't a monster. He was a being, trapped in a form he probably never chose, surviving the only way he knew how. And when given kindness, he returned it. When given help, he accepted it with dignity. When it was time to go, he left with grace. The forest outside my window is quiet tonight. The kind of quiet that holds secrets. I wonder sometimes if he's still out there, somewhere in the deep woods. If he thinks about those years we shared. If he understood what it meant to me, not just helping him but being trusted by something so far beyond my understanding. I'm 55 years old, and I've lived more than half my life with this secret. It shaped me, defined me, gave me purpose when I had none. And now I'm telling you, whoever you are, wherever you are. Not because I need you to believe me, but because he deserved to be known. Deserved to have someone say, he existed. He suffered. He survived. And he was not alone. That cave in the Boundary Waters is still there. Empty now, I imagine. But sometimes, on the coldest nights, when the wind moves through the pines just right, I swear I can hear something. Not eating. Not suffering. Just breathing. Just being. And I hope wherever he is, he found what he was looking for. The same thing we're all looking for, really. Peace. Understanding. A place in this world, even if it's hidden. Even if no one else knows. I know. And I'm grateful I got to be part of his story, just as he became part of mine.